Good evening to the best community on the entire internet. Thank you for allowing us to reach your devices once again, for letting us bring you the following stories of encounters with the paranormal. We hope you enjoy the tales we have for you tonight, for they will undoubtedly demonstrate that the supernatural is probably very, very close to you. So turn off the light if you can, and let yourself be carried away by the following tales of the night. Hello. Good evening to all who are listening. My name is Ana Delgado, and I would like to tell you the story of what my 15th birthday celebration was like. It's usually a very important date for us in Mexico, and for me it was, but because one of the most traumatic, most macabre events of my life happened. Even today, after so long, I still can't find any explanation. I was never one of those girls who longed for a big party, let alone a big flashy dress. Besides, I knew my mom didn't have many resources to do something like that, so even if they had just celebrated with a cake, I would have been perfectly happy. However, my mom saved some money to take me on a trip to Puerto Vallarta. In addition to that, the idea was to go town hopping, visiting places along the way until we reached our destination. So, with that plan, my mom, my sister, my brother, and a little neighbor boy who went with us, who was 6 years old, set out on the road. We made it to Nayarit when night fell upon us. We were on a very dark road when it started to rain heavily, and when the rain calmed down, it got even worse, as a very dense fog barely allowed us to see the road. It was of such magnitude that we were scared. We decided to pull over because we could no longer see anything. The only thing we could hear were the trailers passing at full speed next to us. Very close. So close that each one seemed to move our car, shake it. We advanced a few more meters into nowhere to get a little away from the highway. We couldn't even think about continuing or merging onto the highway. My mom told us we would continue until the fog completely dispersed. We only turned on the hazard lights and prepared to wait. After a while, it seemed like the fog was finally lifting. When it did, we began to see what was around us, as little as we could, because it was already very dark. Suddenly, we saw a cross very close, next to our window. It seemed like those that are placed when someone dies, in a place on the road. But then my brother told us there was another, and another. My brother said there were many more, and suddenly we realized we had entered a cemetery. We quickly left there, and my mom told us it was best to look for a hotel or at least the nearest toll booth, because really, it seemed like we were in the middle of nowhere, that the night had swallowed us up. And back then, there was no thought of carrying a map or GPS on the phone, or anything like that. After advancing a few kilometers through the remaining fog, we saw a very large, neon blue cross. My mom said it was surely a church we were going to approach to park, even if it meant spending the night in the car. So we headed towards that cross in the fog. But we never reached it. We advanced, and the cross kept getting farther and farther away. It was absurd, because we were already close, and it seemed to get farther away each time. It was 2:30 in the morning. We slowed down a bit. We decided not to follow it anymore. We pulled over, and as we did, we saw a man who seemed to be walking along the side of the road. We approached him to ask if he knew where the nearest town was. He pointed ahead, just a few more meters. There was an unmarked dirt exit. He told us to follow that road, and we would soon find a town. Grateful, we followed his advice and took that road. And indeed, a little further on we began to find the first houses. It was curious because, from the highway, no lights were visible despite being close. And in that town, it seemed like daytime. Its cobblestone streets were full of people walking and people sitting at the doors of their houses, in chairs that seemed austere but cozy. An analogy, perhaps, of the entire town. We asked about a hotel, and they pointed us down the street to continue on. So we arrived at the end, at a police station. In front of it was a large stone clock, which seemed to be an important monument in the town. We got out to ask the police officers if there was a hotel or hospital in the town. They told us there was only one, but it was already full because there was a party in the town. That's why the noise and movement at those hours. My mom then asked them if we could sleep there in the car, under the clock, taking advantage of the fact that they were there so we wouldn't feel so insecure. She told them we were just passing through, that we wanted to rest, and they, somewhat annoyed, accepted. My brother and I were very hungry and asked my mom for permission to look for something to eat. A few streets away, we found a food stall and went to order something. The man running the place told us he had nothing left, but that we should go to the party, that we were invited, and we ran back to ask my mom for permission to go. She answered with a resounding no. She said my brother needed to sleep because he was going to drive the next day. So somewhat sad and disappointed, we returned to the inside of the car. I was already very tired of being in it, but I understood. My brother, my sister, and the little boy soon fell asleep. They seemed to be resting. My mom and I couldn't sleep. We felt like we didn't fit and it was very hot, but we had closed the windows because the streets were full of huge cockroaches, those that fly in earwigs that walked between people's feet without phasing them. The night was becoming eternal for me. I was fed up with that place. I just wanted it to be morning. I watched that stone clock, and it seemed to be going slower and slower. The last time I saw it, it was 3:45 in the morning. The hands were going so slowly that it seemed they had completely stopped. As soon as the first ray of sun came out, I began to wake everyone up, telling them it was time, that we had to leave. We started the car and headed back toward the highway, but my brother suggested going back, looking for a place to have breakfast. There would surely be something open for the hungover people from the party. Besides, we didn't know how far it was to the next town. We had barely reached the exit that the man walking along the road had pointed out to us. So my mom said yes. We turned around to look for something to eat in the town, but we drove on, and on, and on. And there was nothing. That is, there were no houses, no people, nothing. There was no town where we had spent the night. We returned to the highway, thinking it had been a mistake, that we had perhaps taken a different route. But no, we verified it was exactly the same path. It was the only one. We started laughing very nervously. It wasn't possible what we had just seen, but it also wasn't possible that we had made a mistake. We quickly left to find some town where we could have breakfast and calm down. A real, living town. The truth is, my brother and I still wonder what would have happened if we had gone to that party we were invited to. What is the most terrifying thing you have experienced on a road? I always like to ask you this question because each time I am more surprised by your answers. Some of your stories, although short, are worthy of appearing on this program. From strange visions that appear on curves, to beings that move among the trees, as fast as the cars at full speed, even empty altars that make you wonder if the saints placed there ever move. When you come across one of these, don't stop there and don't accept, as you've already heard, directions from strangers. Well, at least not from characters walking on the roads in the middle of the night. And now it's time to continue and change the subject. There are more stories in this episode. My story is divided, you could say, into two parts. You see, on one occasion I went to a party with some classmates from the teaching college. It was the first party we had as a group, and it was to mark the end of the semester. When night fell, when most people had already gone home, only the owner of the house where we were, 3 other friends, and I remained. We were singing, drinking a little more, and having a great time. Very funny. Until very late at night, Two of my friends asked the boy whose house it was if he hadn't bothered the old man, an elderly man they assumed was his grandfather. They described him as medium height, with a thick mustache and white beard. They told him he was wearing a hat and gray clothes, and that he was wandering around the patio, peering towards where we were. I had also seen him earlier, but I didn't think we were bothering him. The boy who owned the house started to get nervous. He told us that man's name, but that he wasn't a person, that he wasn't a living person. He started laughing very nervously and apologized to us. He told us he didn't think we could see him. He said that sometimes he didn't even see him anymore. We asked with great curiosity about the story behind this gentleman. It caused me a lot of conflict. I didn't know how to react because I had been the first to see him, and he told us the following. He died many years ago. He lived here before this land belonged to my grandparents. Imagine that. My uncle, who also lives here, always sees him. He says he often talks to him, that he tells him to dig up his money. He points to the exact place where he can find it. And moreover, I'm going to tell you, it's over there, back there, under that lemon tree. In fact, once my grandfather and my uncle started digging, they went very deep, but nothing. They didn't find anything. My friend fell silent when he said that, and we became restless, somewhat serious, no longer with the tranquility of before. We stayed a little longer until dawn. I didn't really feel afraid. After a few months, we returned to that house, my friend's house, for a party, specifically the Halloween party. Some of our classmates were a bit nervous because we had told them what we had seen the previous time. However, the party was very normal, very pleasant. Everyone started arriving early. When it was 11 o'clock, there were only 6 of us left. The owner of the house went with another one of my friends. He was showing him the house, and then his uncle came out, the one who lives there, the one who had told us he talked to the gentleman who appears. I approached him with some curiosity to chat with him, to ask him about him. When I approached, I noticed out of the corner of my eye that another person was going to go with him, but when he saw me, he walked away. And well, it turns out they were taking advantage of that night to perform a ritual, to ask that the gentleman leave my friend's uncle in peace. That was even more interesting than what I expected to learn when I approached him. But despite my curiosity, a little later, I had to leave. But something changed from then on. Weeks passed, and I began to struggle a lot to sleep. I would wake up in the wee hours of the morning, and although I couldn't see in the dark, I could feel that there was someone in the room. A huge, very tall and stout man. A presence that felt imposing in the first few nights. I wanted to think it was just a nightmare. But afterwards, when I woke up, I not only felt it, now I could see it, standing in the doorway, as if to prevent me from thinking of leaving. It started happening every day, and when I tried to move, to turn my back on it, I felt it approaching, sitting on my bed. I started sleeping with the light on, and only then was I able to make it through the night without waking up. And after that, it was no longer limited to nights. When I was at home in the afternoon, noises could be heard, strange sounds coming from my room, drawers opening, things falling off the desk. And even then, even at that moment, I wasn't afraid. I just felt very angry and tired. I told my mom, but as expected, she didn't believe me, until I finally told my friend from the house. He told me he would put me in touch with the person who had performed the ritual at his house, that he could help me. The person asked me if what I saw in my room was the same gentleman we had all seen in that house, and I told him no. He told me he had already imagined that. And the thing is, at my friend's house there were 2, but people could only see one of them. The gentleman with the white beard. He gave me a bracelet that I can never take off, and told me it would protect me from him and any entity that wanted to attach itself to me. He asked me to pray a novena to the one in my room, but I had to do it with someone else, and my mom helped me with that. I think she did it because, even though she knows I'm not religious, she saw how desperate I was, and fortunately, I never saw it again. There are strange things surrounding this story. During those weeks when that man appeared in my room, I was, so to speak, very open to other presences. Once I even saw a witch, but that, I think, will be material for another story. I like it when people give us those little tastes of more stories, but I will ask you, please, not to stop there, and if you share these experiences that can enrich an initial story. And where are you listening to us from? Leave us a comment if you want to know what happened with that witch. But of course, it's time to move on to another story, to end this episode of Tales of the Night. Hello community, my name is Malena. For years I have been following your program, and I am one of your most loyal followers. I love it, and before starting with my story, I really want to congratulate you for that excellent work in doing it. I am from Xalapa, Veracruz. My family is from Mexico City, and for some reason in this maternal family, my grandmother, one of her sons, and I share a connection, a bond with the paranormal. I had my first experience at the age of 10, and in fact, since my grandmother died, she has been very present in my life. She and a cousin who died in a car accident come to me continuously in my dreams. They send me messages. I know they are with me, even if I can't see them. I can feel them. They are, to call them something, my guardian angels. However, what I'm going to share tonight with you is my most recent experience. It begins when I moved to a small town in the state of Pennsylvania, in the United States. This state has a lot of history, fascinating old architecture. The small towns still have that old smell. The houses have a ghostly aura. That mysterious atmosphere is impossible to ignore. I even recommend you come at some point if you like that aura of mystery. I love walking these streets and wondering what happened in these settings in other times. I moved to a town called Northumberland for work reasons, and we soon found an apartment in an extremely quiet area. When I visited it for the first time, I liked it, even though it was dark and gloomy. As you would expect such an old place to be, in the end, I ended up renting it. My boyfriend also liked it because it seemed quiet. A few days after moving in, things started happening. We heard someone coming in and closing the door. Then their footsteps crossed the whole apartment until they reached the back part, where the guest room is. That's where the sound stopped. It was always heard at the same time, between 5:30 and 5:45. Very early in the morning. The first few times my boyfriend heard them, I had left earlier, so he thought it was me, that I had come back for something, or that for some reason I had decided to skip. Since then, I told him that something, besides us, something inhabited that place. A presence. I didn't know exactly what or who. One very early Saturday before 5:30 a.m., I was already in the kitchen, drinking coffee, reading the news on my phone as usual. I heard the footsteps again. They passed behind me, but I decided to ignore them. A little later, my boyfriend got up. He asked me if I had just entered our room, and I told him no. I asked him why he said that. He told me that he already knew I was going to answer no, but that he had to ask. He told me that something had woken him up, that he felt that I came in and sat on the bed. He opened his eyes to see me, but the figure he caught a glimpse of was not me. It was a short, plump woman with almost white hair. He told me that he squeezed his eyes to see her, but she got up. She walked around the bed until she was in front of him and approached his face. She said something to him in his ear. Chela. He said he heard very clearly. He opened his eyes out of fear, but there was no one. He He sat up and got up, and for a moment he thought that maybe it had been me. And simply with his eyes half closed, he had not recognized me. He asked me who Cella was. If I knew anyone by that name. I told him it was my grandmother's name, probably of who he had seen. Her name was Celia, but everyone called her that nickname. He asked me why she had come to see him, why she said her nickname, and the only thing I could think to answer him was that because she is always with me. That maybe she just wanted to let him know that she was there too, always watching over me. I asked him not to be afraid of her, since she was not the person who walked around the apartment, that what inhabited our house was something else. I also told him that I was going to have to burn herbs and pray until that thing left. I always have Palo Santo, incense, candles, sage, and more. The following Saturday, we had to go pick up an aunt who was coming from Mexico at the airport. She was coming to visit me for a month, and she also perceived those footsteps. Just like we heard them, she always heard them every morning. But she heard that the footsteps walked from one side to the other in her room, the guest room, where they used to stop. She heard them there next to her. When lying down, she told me that she wouldn't open her eyes, and I told her not to worry, that thing was going to leave. I would take care of it. That same day, I started lighting a white candle, every day with a glass of water. I also prayed the most powerful Psalms, 91, 23, 27, 34, 40, 51, 121, and 127. I burned sage and Palo Santo when I got home from work, and at night, again before going to sleep, I prayed and asked those people who were in the house to leave, that they no longer belong to this plane, that they go towards the light. This became a routine. On weekends, I did it up to 3 times a day. I prayed. I burned my herbs. I prayed again. One Saturday morning, very early, while everyone around was sleeping, my aunt was reading on her iPad because the footsteps at dawn were not letting her sleep. It was her only way to ignore them, to act as if nothing was happening, as if she didn't hear them. She was reading, and I was already making the first prayer of the day. Suddenly I heard a scream, coming from the guest room. My aunt screamed my name, and then I heard a loud noise as if something had broken. My boyfriend woke up and we both ran to her room. I asked her what was going on, and she said that someone had thrown something at the window. My boyfriend checked, and indeed the glass was broken in the middle, and there was glass on the outside, as if the blow had come from inside, as if they had punched it. The glass had no more cracks, just a hole, like a blunt blow in the center. There wasn't a single piece of glass inside the house, not even the smallest one. I told my aunt that it was fine. It was the only thing I could say, that what was there had left. It had left angrily, but it had finally left. The two of them looked at me somewhat skeptical as I went to the kitchen for my herbs to burn and my rosary. Afterwards, I prayed the blood of Christ. I opened doors and windows and thanked God for his presence in my home. While we continued living there, we didn't hear anything again. Everything was calm until I moved out, and only then did I know what could be the origin of those manifestations. I met a neighbor who had been there for a long time. Curiously, I didn't know her before. She told me that the owner, the former owner of the place, lived right below me. She had a son who died in an accident, just 21 years old. He worked at night, and in the mornings he would come home to sleep. The apartment, my apartment, was the upstairs part of what used to be a whole house, but when the young man died, his father passed away soon after. The owner, alone, then decided to divide it into 2 floors and get rid of the upstairs part. The neighbor told me that the owner still cried every night for her son. Everyone will draw their own conclusions, but I believe our dead must be allowed to go, so they can rest in peace. No matter how painful it is, they know we love them, and that one day we will be reunited with them. I believe there are entities that cannot leave this plane because they have debts to pay, karmic cycles to fulfill for their ancestors, or simply that death surprised them when they were not prepared to leave. These last ones above all, we must help them leave with prayers so that they pass to the next plane, to eternal life, to find the light. There is no doubt that prayer has power, and always, believe me, always it will be heard. Try it if you have the need. I send you a big hug and blessings. Now from Lewisburg, Pennsylvania,